As a person living with dystrophy, walking under the sun has always been a struggle for me. Despite how much I love the sun, I sometimes find myself thinking, wouldn't it be better if the sun didn't exist? Would it really be? Actually, this question is much deeper than we think. The sun isn't just a bright point in the sky, it's the source of life on Earth. So, what would happen if there were no sun? What would the Earth be like? Could life continue? There was a rumor going around for a while. I don't know if anyone still believes it, that if the Earth were just 1 meter closer to the sun, it would burn up, and if it were 1 meter farther, it would freeze, and so on. But in reality, our planet moves about 4.5 million kilometers closer and farther from the sun over the course of a year. If you added or subtracted not just a meter, even a whole kilometers, life would continue without any travel. But here is something even more surprising. Forget getting closer to or farther from the sun. Even if the sun completely disappeared right now, life would still continue for billions of years. In fact, at some point, we might actually have to intentionally take Earth out of the sun's orbit. Why? Get around. The sun is about 150 million kilometers away from Earth. It was born approximately 4.6 billion years ago, with a mass 333,000 times of Earth. Its immense gravity began pulling it inward, causing it to collapse under its own weight. This collapse triggered the release of an enormous amount of energy. This energy prevented the star from being collapsed over itself. The sun has been emitting life-sustaining energy through the nuclear fusion. We call it an energy source. But here's the question. Do you think life on Earth would be possible without the sun? Actually, the sun has only major importance for the origin of life on Earth. It provides the heat that keeps water in liquid form. But of course, that's not case everywhere. Around every star, there's an area called Goldilocks zone, and within this area, planets can have liquid water. But for this to happen, the planet also needs to have sufficient atmospheric pressure on its surface. Otherwise, the sun alone can't keep the water in liquid form by the energy it emits. For the sun, the Goldilocks zone starts at about 38% of the distance between the Earth and the sun, and it extends up to roughly 10 times Earth's orbital distance. What would happen if the sun suddenly disappeared? At first, we need to understand this. Any force in the universe can affect instantly. For example, gravity feels like it affects instantly, but in reality, nothing in the universe can travel faster than the speed of light. So if the sun were to suddenly disappear, Earth wouldn't notice it right away. As we mentioned in the last video, how big is the universe? It would take 8 minutes and 20 seconds for both light and gravitational effects of the sun's disappearance to reach us. According to the general relativity, the speed of gravitation and light are the same. If the sun went poof out of existence, we on Earth would still see it shining for 8 minutes and 20 seconds, and we would continue orbiting around it about 15,000 kilometers during that time. For Pluto and other objects farther out, it would take hours, even days, to notice anything had changed. They would keep orbiting around a star that no longer exists, as nothing had happened. By the end of the first week, without the sun, the average surface temperature would be freezing, 0 Celsius, 32 degrees Fahrenheit. For the first few days or months, we could get by, but by the end of the first year, without the sun, the average global surface temperature would be minus 33 degrees Celsius, 100 Fahrenheit. And since the surface of Earth would be very cold, people would live in underground shelters, because as you go toward the center of Earth, the temperature increased by 25-30 degrees Celsius for every 1000 meters. In any case, within a few years, the Earth would turn into a giant snowball. The living organisms most immediately affected by the laws of heat and light would be the plants. The poor plants would be much worse off. Without the sun, most of them would die within days or weeks. Except for large plants or giant trees contain enough sugar for energy, they could technically live in the dark for years. Their problem is going to be that the earth will get quite cold. In fact, trees and plants would freeze to death. The water and sap inside of them solidify before they died of starvation. Of course, you can imagine how this would disrupt the food chain. With the plants dying, you might think the main problem would be the loss of oxygen production. But now, there are about 1.08 quintillion kilograms of oxygen in our atmosphere. An average adult uses approximately 850-900 grams of oxygen per day. If only humans were consuming oxygen, there would be enough oxygen to last of us about 500,000 years, which is 1.5 times longer than the entire time our species has existed since it evolved. Of course, other living beings also consume oxygen, but as plants begin to die, herbivores would starve. And as herbivores disappeared, carnivores would start to decline as well. So many species would be eliminated. Therefore, their impact on oxygen would be relatively less. And since all this destruction would happen so quickly, there might not have enough time for evolution to kick in. This could have triggered a massive extinction. But life isn't just made up of animals and plants. Even all of the estimated 8.7 million eukaryotic species on Earth are almost nothing compared to the bacteria and archaea. Most of these single-celled organisms don't need animals or plants at all to survive. In other words, as long as bacteria and archaea survive, life can diversify again. Many bacteria and archaea have evolved to survive in most extreme heat, cold, salt, and acid conditions. So millions of species on Earth would carry on regardless of whether the sun exists or not. Life would find a way once again and continue its presence on Earth, not just a few thousand or million years, even for billions of years. Could humans exist with the disruption of food chain and consequently the loss of our food sources like animals and farms? Everything would obviously change for us too. It wouldn't be possible to feed 8 billion people and a large part of humanity would perish. However, some of us could survive because of synthetically produced food. We could continue growing plants using artificial lighting. Also, fossil fuels and nuclear energy would become our greatest friends. And fossil fuels would continue to support our civilization for thousands of years, while nuclear energy would do it so far for billions of years. But of course, since the human pollution would rapidly decrease, so we wouldn't need to consume that much fuels. Of course, the way the disappearance of the sun would affect us also depends on the level of our civilization at that moment. For example, if we were caught with today's immature and terrible energy and supply network, most of us would probably perish. But if when this disaster happens, we have built a type 2 civilization, we would be better prepared for this crisis. Who knows, maybe this time we could even establish a more humane and inclusive order, and it wouldn't necessarily require the sun to disappear for us to leave this system. Well, to be sure, it's not going to happen. The sun will die billions of years from now by expanding, boiling off our oceans and swallowing the earth. The sun is not going to simply disappear. Matter and energy don't vanish.